Hello and welcome on in, everybody. Good to see you. My name is Sam Peterson, and I am your host for today's Photoshop challenge. Today, we are doing a Ghostify effect, essentially where you can turn any figure into a sort of ghostly image. So, if you want to follow along with this challenge, definitely check out the description down below. That's where you'll be able to get the starter file, so you can follow along with all these same files that I'm using. And let me show you kind of what we're working with today. Show you the effect that we're creating first off. This is the sort of effect that we're going to be doing a couple different techniques, combining them to kind of get a cool look like this. There's definitely a lot of flexibility for you to play with each technique and kind of tweak it to your liking. But this is the look that we are going for today. So this is the starter file. This is the images that we're working with. There's a couple different figures, I think, in the starter file. You're welcome to use either one, of course. This is the one I will be using. I like this one. If you can find an image that has some strong lighting like this, the shadows and the lighting, the contrast between the two do make for a cool look. If you have someone all in a white robe and it's very evenly lit, it still looks fine, it still looks good, but I do like this sort of dramatic lighting. You might just have to tweak the values that we're using so it's not too bright, because the one I'll be using is a little bit darker and in shadow in some areas. Also, I just wanted to say hey to everyone. Good to see everybody in chat. What's up, Tim? We got Robert, Oliver, our mod Cody Bear, Frank. Good to see you, Froja. How you doing? What's up, everyone? Hey, Patrick, Susan, RB. I saw General Kenobi in there too. What's going on, everybody? So let's just jump right into it. I'm first going to be editing this background. So you can find a background that's already kind of spooky and save you this time, but I really like this image. I thought the forest was really cool. It's just more of like a calm kind of morning. So I want to turn this into more of like a spooky, ghostly forest. So we're going to do that with a few different layers here. So first off, I'm going to go ahead and go into Layer, New Adjustment Layer, and Color Lookup. And for the first color lookup, you can scroll through these. You can select one and you can actually use the arrow keys. I'm just using the right arrow key to kind of scroll through, see if there's any looks that appeal to you. But personally, I want to go for let's see, I think the horror blue works pretty well for this. Kind of gives us some cool coloration like that. And I'm going to go in again and add a new adjustment layer and another color lookup. You can stack these as much as you want. And for this one, I think I'm going to do Moonlight, which is a really good one for kind of turning a scene light to dark. Now, this is a bit too much. This is a bit too extreme. I might take this is my horror blue. I might ease off that a bit and put it closer to like 60%. And then for this one, what I can do is I can actually mask off parts because I like what it did to the sky. I just don't like what it did to the ground plane here. So what I can do is I can take a soft round brush, just an airbrush, and you can change the flow down pretty low if you're using a mouse, and just kind of like mask out the parts that are, a bit too much for you. So I think that looks pretty good. It's mostly that floor right there that I'm lightening up. Just because it went too dark, we lost it a bit, but I do like all that blue that it's giving. So I think that's a pretty good balance there. I might want to tweak this a little bit more. I don't quite love the color, so I'm going to go to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, Hue and Saturation, so I can specifically control the color of all this. I think it's most of the way there. I just want to tweak it a little bit. So from here, I might make it a little bit more green. I think that like greenish blue works well for this ghostly effect. The saturation, I think I just want to bring down, make it all a little bit more monochromatic. So maybe like -16 for the color, for the hue, -40 for the saturation. I could even bring down the brightness a bit if I wanted. Maybe I'll do -7. So I think that helps. Now we kind of got a cool little base to work with. I like this. I think it looks good. And we can move on to the figure at this point. So, hey Omicorn, how you doing? Good to see you. Welcome on in, everybody. Clever, Anki, Sean, hey, how you doing? So I want to group these. I got to keep my layers organized here. I'll move my figure at the very top. This is my figure layer. I'll name this Ghost. And then I will Shift select all my background layers And I actually have to double click the background layer to unlock it. Click OK. Now I can shift select all of them, press Controller Command G, and group that. And we'll just call this background. Keep it separate from the figure. So what I want to do here is I want to go ahead and take my figure and mask her out. So I'm going to select my quick selection tool here in the top left. Hotkey is W, and I'm going to do select subject. This little button right at the top. Just using AI, it kind of selects it for us. And this actually looks pretty good. Because of the nature of this effect, we don't need like perfect masking. You could always go up to select and mask if you want to further refine the mask. But for this effect and for our purposes, we don't really need to. And I think this might have done a pretty good job on its own. So I'm going to go down to the layers panel, click this little rectangular icon that says add layer mask when you hover over it, and mask her out. And I think this did pretty good. Like even with the hair, that hair against the background, without any refining, looks pretty good. So I think that works. So from here, what I want to do is I want to make her a smart object because we're going to be doing some things to this. So I'm going to right click that layer and do convert to smart object. This way we can scale it around without losing any data. I'm going to put her wherever I want, kind of scale her to the size that I want. I think I maybe want her standing like right here on the path. Maybe I'll shrink her down a bit. I think maybe about that size is cool. So I'll press enter to confirm that change. And then from here, what I want to do is start making her look like a ghost. So what we can do is we can change her to a different blending mode. And I'm going to use a linear dodge blending mode here. You can see she's already starting to get a bit transparent. Because of the blending mode, we can see through her a little bit. But I also can further that by trying to change the opacity down a bit. So I can lower that as much as I want. I still want this pretty visible. So I might go to 75%. So there's the shift from 100 to 75, just lower it down just a touch. And then from there, I think what I'm going to want to do is make her a ghostly greenish blue. So what we can do is we can go into image adjustments. Usually I would go into layer, new adjustment layer, but because this is a smart object, it will save these changes and we can always tweak them later. So I'll just do a straight adjustment for hue and saturation. And I'm going to set this to colorize. So we can color her and kind of go for like this kind of ghostly bluish green. So I think about 170 looks pretty good. I think I'll do that. Saturation, I might want to crank that up a bit. And maybe I'll do somewhere around 40. I'm going to do like 42 there. And then the lightness we'll leave alone. Click OK. She's already looking more ghostly with that coloration. We have that monochromatic look now, which works really well for the ghost look. From here, what I want to do is I want to blur her a bit. She's way too sharp for a ghost. We got to have that kind of ghostly fade, that ghostly blur. So what I can do is I can go into Filter, Blur, and do Motion Blur. Now, Motion Blur you can play with. There's the distance, which is essentially the amount of blur. Then there's the angle. So you could do like a kind of diagonal left and right angle. It's really up to you. I think that could look pretty cool. I'll just do like a side-to-side angle. Experiment around with this. You can always change it later too, which is really great with smart objects. But I'm going to go ahead and add a motion blur of, I think around this range, maybe like 75 looks pretty good. And you'll see we still need this to be the base of our figure, but we're going to add a little bit of focus in a moment. So I'll click OK, and that's kind of our ghostly figure so far. So I think from here, we're going to want to create a focal point. So I'm going to duplicate this layer. Also, just wanted to say hi to anyone popping in before we go to this next step. What's up, Jack? Good to see you. General Kenobi says she's more ghost now than woman. Yeah, she's definitely having that transform effect into the ghost world now. We got a few more steps that I think will make this even cooler. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take this layer, our one layer, and I'm going to do Controller Command J to duplicate it. What I want to do is set this to a normal blending mode. We have linear dodge right now. We'll set it to normal. And I'm going to go into this blur, right click it and do delete smart filter. So it deleted the blur on the smart filter, and that's what it looks like stacked. That's what it looks like on its own. Um, and I deleted the blur. Now I just want a mask in the areas that I want. So I have this layer selected. I'm going to create a layer mask down at the bottom of the layers panel, little rectangular icon. Now I have a mask. Now you can do a little hotkey to fill in the contents of a layer or a layer mask with your current color. I currently have black selected, so I can do Alt or Option backspace, and that just fills it all in with black. Just a little hotkey. I could have also just painted the whole thing in with black, but I'm going to select white, and with a soft, round, large brush, just mask in the areas I want. So you can see it's all blurry, but this gives us the ability to kind of create a focal point. So right around her head, I'm just going to paint in maybe a little bit around the top of the nightgown. I could try like a little bit of the arm, maybe the hair, just this whole area where we want the viewer to look. We could create a little bit more focus there, kind of like that. You can always tweak that, mask out the edges if you went too far. I just kind of want it around the face, essentially. Adds a little bit of focus, a little bit of clarity. So I think that looks pretty good. The opacity is at 75 for this. I think we'll leave that. If you don't like it, if it's a little too focused, you could always ease that down to like 50. But yeah, it's subtle. So I'll maybe actually leave it at like 55. Take it down a little bit opacity wise. I think that looks pretty good. From here, we can tweak this a little bit more. We can go in, let me see. Yeah, we can duplicate our original layer. And then this one will be kind of a glow effect that we're gonna do. Getting ghost detection equipment. I ain't afraid of no ghost. Yeah, have any of you guys ever watched, what is it? There's two shows. There's Ghost Adventures and Ghost Hunters. I think Ghost Adventures is the one that we've watched a lot of, but it's always a fun show if you guys have seen that one. I gotta watch that today after today's challenge. Susan, good to see you. Welcome on in. All right, so the next step is we're going to be creating a glow. She's already kind of glowing because of the nature of the linear dodge and the glow we kind of get from that, and the motion blur adds a bit of that ghostly kind of glow. But what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate the original layer, the first one we made, with Controller Command J, hotkey to duplicate, and bring that to the very top. And again, this is to create a glow effect. So we're going to be using some layer styles here. What I want to do is change the blending mode from linear dodge to color dodge. And then, let's see, we'll leave the opacity as it is for now, but we'll double click the layer, which will bring us into the layer styles. And this is where we can do some layer styles and stack some effects to create this glow. So from here, what I want to do is I want to do inner glow. I'll move this off to the side so you can see it a little bit better. But the inner glow, we're going to have set to color dodge. The opacity is at 50%, and feel free to play around with all of these. But these are the values I found kind of have a good look for this effect, and I'll show you what it looks like when we're all done with it by itself. Noise is set to 0. We just have white selected for this color. And the elements, technique is softer, source is edge, then 0 choke, and size 100. So the size is at 100. I feel like it's a good medium there. You can leave all this the same. Contour is this linear slash, and then we have the range at 50. So that looks good. Color overlay is the next thing that we're going to be doing. This adds a big effect, as you can see. For color overlay, we want soft light, and I just did a full saturated, full bright bluish green color here. This kind of turquoise ghostly color that we've been using. So select OK, and the opacity is at 100. So it's all the way up for this really intense look that we will fine tune shortly. And then from here, we want outer glow. This is set to a blend mode of vivid light. The opacity, let's see. Yeah, we can have that around 50 or so. I think that looks pretty good. And then noise is at 0. Again, a white color. Technique is softer. Spread is 0. Size is about 46. That's kind of where we got it. And the bottom is just leaving default, which should be this linear contour and then the range of 50. So there we go. We can click OK and confirm those. Now I want to show you what that looks like without the other layers. So we kind of have this look here, right? It's this sort of, it's a cool glow. It's a little too hard edge. So we do want to change the motion blur here. Um, Altogether, it looks like that. It's a bit intense, but once we blur it, it'll kind of spread out a little bit. And we can also fine tune the opacity. So let's get this isolated by itself. I'm going to save it. Always a good habit to get into Controller Command S to save if you haven't. But let's go into motion blur here. Double click this because we have this at 75 right now. And we can try just like what effect do we want? Now, the more you do it, the more distorted it gets, right? This just becomes this big kind of window of blur. If you do it down to a certain point, you can still see kind of the shape of that figure. Like this, we're starting to see that figure's shape, but it's blurred a lot, which is really cool. So I think you can play around with it. You can just do it a little bit if you want. But I think in like the 100, 200, 300, 400 range looks pretty good. So I might do like 350, see how that looks. And then we can stack that with the other layers and see. So I'm doing Control or Command Z. This is what it was before. This is what it was now. You can always go in and try more. See how it looks with the other layers. Like that's pretty cool too. That's the 700 range. But yeah, I think somewhere in that 300-400 range is pretty good. So I'm going to click OK. And you can see these layers because they're like color dodge and linear dodge. They're going to be stacking. Like the amount of intensity that adds is pretty extreme. And so you can always adjust the opacity of these. Now for this, I have the opacity at 75%. I can always go in and just tone it down. Because that's a really intense look. I don't want it to be too intense. I just want like a happy medium. And again, if you ease off or if you hide the other layers, you can kind of see how much of it's actually showing. So we got it at 33. I'm just going to play around with it and see like, I think around 30. Toggle it on and off. It's just a nice glow. Nice kind of ghostly glow, I think adds to this. So that's looking pretty good. We want to do a couple more things here. So let's go ahead and just group this. I like to keep my different subjects grouped. So if I have a bunch of layers for the background, any element, any separate element I have, I tend to group. I don't know if you guys are grouping and naming layers types, but I mean, when you get really big files, it helps a lot to keep this all separate. So I'm going to shift click all 3 layers and do Controller Command G. I'll call this Ghost. And I'm going to save that right there. Just want to see if there's any questions in chat. Talking about Scooby-Doo. I saw something about Ghostbusters earlier. Let's see. Yeah, just a lot of spooky ghost talk. That's good. It's on brand for today's challenge. I had a spooky challenge last time, I think during around Halloween, but I guess I got to do like one each challenge set. So let's check out this picture and see if anything's looking off. To me, ghostly effects usually have kind of this faded look, right? This is a really sort of hard edge, especially at the bottom. It just doesn't look right. So I think we kind of need to fade this. Now we could actually take this group and lower the opacity completely if you want to play around with like how faded this ghost is. But what I want to do is select my group and actually add a mask to the group with this little rectangular button, the bottom of the layers panel. And I want to sort of mask out, selecting black to conceal. White reveals, black conceals. And just with a soft round brush, I want to kind of paint out the background here. Or not paint out the background, fade out the bottom of the figure from the background. So you can kind of play around with this effect. You can select white again to reveal it if you went too far. That's the nice thing about working non-destructively with masks. Anytime you want to like erase something, it's advisable to use a mask just so you can bring it back if you need to. Any sort of non-destructive workflow you can use is always a good idea. That's things like masks, things like smart objects. It gives you a lot of flexibility for sure. Slime and skeletons. Yeah, we're missing some things in this image. Um, if we had time, we could put a bunch of spooky elements in. I could even try like masking out the hair a bit. The hair has kind of a sharp edge. It's faded decently because of the blur, but I could try misting off any areas I don't want as focused. I think that looks pretty cool. Let me put a little bit more of that back down. I think that's a pretty nice fade that we have going on. And you can see now that we have all these effects in place, um, the dramatic lighting I think really adds to this image. So I mentioned that a bit in the beginning of the stream, but we have this really intense lighting on the left side of her, which I think kind of gives this just a lot of pop, a lot of contrast, and I think strong contrast works really well for like kind of spooky images. So you can try this with different images, like I said, but I do think this one with shadows and lights, a nice contrast between them, has a pretty cool effect. Sounds like a Paul and Sam collab, slime and skulls. Yeah, absolutely. Sam, you might want to lighten the ground around her for sure. So I think this is looking good, but yeah, it looks like would she be emitting light? Um, would she have some sort of ghostly aura around her? It does seem like it's a fairly stark contrast from the figure to the really dark scene around her. And what I can do about that is I can create a new layer, and we'll just call this ghostly fog. And I want to do the same blending mode that we used for her initial layer, which was linear dodge. Linear dodge is really great for adding um, non-opaqueness to a dark background because color dodge is something I use a lot, but this is like linear dodge. This is color dodge. It's a bit more opaque, right? So it's really good I use it for like rim lighting for characters when I'm painting. You can use it for a lot of things, but in this case, it'll be mist. Let me see if I can delete this here. There we go. Just select all and then press delete. And what I'm going to do is you can use a soft round brush and just kind of airbrush this sort of ghostly aura. So this is just the default like Photoshop soft round brush. If you're using a mouse, try taking the flow down to like 10%, 15%, and just clicking around. Mine's a lot more harsh. I'm using a tablet, but you can just kind of paint in this ghostly aura. But what I want to do, I'm going to delete this. I'm going to paint it in with this cloud brush I have. So this is actually a textured cloud brush. And I can upload this to the Discord if you guys are interested. I've uploaded my brush sets before, um, but in case you want this brush, I think it's pretty fun. It had some nice texture to it. So I have this sort of mid-tone, full saturation, bluish green, this kind of same color that we've been using for this ghostly effect. And I just kind of want to paint in around here. I'm going to do a little bit around the edges of her in general, but I also want to kind of blend it in with the ground. That's sort of what RB said. Like the ground seems a bit too dark, so I think it could be kind of cool to give her this ghostly fog surrounding her. And since I'm painting this in, I'm just going to use a soft round brush as an eraser, and I can fade off of it. Sometimes I like to zoom out for this type of thing just to see the big picture, but I don't want to go too far on this. But yeah, play around with it. You can add the fog all the way out here if you want. Like it's taking up the whole ground. That actually looks kind of cool. I'm just fading off of it with the eraser, blending it out a little bit. Might leave remnants of it. That's kind of neat looking. So now if I toggle that on and off, we have a bit more atmosphere. I feel like she's fitting in with the bottom of the image a little bit more because this blending mode linear dodge does basically create a light. It's essentially creating this lighting effect. We're just fading it off so it's subtle, so it doesn't look too harsh and abrupt. And that is pretty much it. We toggle on our ghostly aura there. I think that looks cool. If you went too far with it, you can always ease off the opacity. You always have tons of tools here to tweak and fine tune things. And you can always go back after the fact if you want to try changing the motion blur direction of the figure, if you want to try changing the hue and saturation that we edited. All these things are on different layers, and they're either like on adjustment layers or they're done through the smart filters. So this gives you a lot of flexibility to put all the elements in place and then go back after the effect and adjust it. That is it for us. If you have not checked out the Discord, definitely give it a look. This is where we're posting all the challenges that we're doing. We got the yesterday's challenge with the liquid text. We already got a ghost in by Cash Rob, and very nice. So check it out. Post your challenges. I'm here giving feedback every day, looking over what you're doing, checking it out. Great job so far. Everyone's been doing really cool stuff. So this is where we kind of post everything that we share with the community. The community gives you feedback. I give you feedback. Definitely check it out if you haven't. And thanks so much for joining me today, everybody. I do appreciate it. I will see you all next time, and have fun with these challenges. Good luck.